Chapter 361. A Muslim Girl in the West, Section 14. If the Friendly Students' Conference was stigma, the first speech of Dr. Ibtihal at the Sudanese Students' Club was considered a defeat and disgrace. The Muslim brothers, sisters, and the supporters of the Prophet Muhammad's Sunnah felt that their religious leaders had cheated them and let them down. All newspapers in Athens put in their first pages the photo of the angry professor when he raised his hand and slapped Dr. Ibtihal. The newspapers wrote scandalous articles under that shameful and criminal act. Besides that, all the writers of those articles considered the disgraceful action of such a distinguished professor who lived many years in Athens and taught in one of its illustrious universities a defeat and great scandal for all Muslims and Muslim scholars. It wasn't the right way to silence a voice of a woman who openly exposed the teachings of Islam about violence and terrorism. In actual fact, the professor's act proved to thousands of Athenians that Islam is indeed a religion of terror. The university in which the professor was teaching issued public apology to Dr. Ibtihal and invited her to come and speak in its auditorium. They requested her to speak in the issues of women in Islam. In the public apology, the university considered the professor not qualified to teach in its Department of Religious Studies anymore. A group of intellectual Muslims condemned the inappropriate behavior of the Muslim professor, but accused Dr. Ibtihal of delivering a hate speech against Islam and Muslims. They threatened to take her to court if she did not issue a public apology. They claimed that she used unreliable religious sources. Moreover, they argued that all the hadiths she quoted in her speech were not authentic sayings of the Prophet Muhammad. They said Muhammad and his followers never attacked or forced anyone to accept Islam by the sword. They argued further that all those quotations she mentioned were known as Israeliyat, which some Jewish scribes interpolated and injected them in those early writings in order to destroy the pure and peaceful message of the Prophet Muhammad. Dr. Ibtihal was interviewed by a couple of newspapers regarding the demand of the Muslim intellectual group. She said she would not apologize until she was being proved wrong or lying in her speech. When Dr. Ibtihal refused to issue a public apology, the leaders of the so-called intellectual Muslims lodged a complaint against her in the court. Meanwhile, the Sudanese students' Muslim groups kicked out of office their leaders and cancelled the remaining 2 speeches. They called for an emergency meeting in which they fired their former leaders and elected new ones. Those new leaders tried in vain to convince Dr. Ibtihal to come for another debate. They said to her, they would choose one among themselves to challenge her in a public debate. She said to them they were not qualified religiously and morally to debate her. Her reply was considered to be an insult to them. They threatened to take revenge on her if she refused to come for the debate. Dr. Ibtihal informed the Athenian police and showed them the threatening letter. The police made some arrests among the Muslim students. The police sensed that Dr. Ibtihal's life in danger. For her safety, they moved her to an unknown location and refused to disclose her whereabouts to any media people. Nevertheless, the police could not hide Dr. Ibtihal from the law. The court informed her that she supposed to appear before the court on some allegations concerning her controversial speech that she delivered in the Sudanese Students' Club. Dr. Ibtihal sent a letter of request to the United Nations office in Athens and asked for a lawyer's fees. The UN office refused to accept her request for legal aid. Fortunately, the Legal Research and Resource Center for Human Rights in Athens agreed to represent Dr. Ibtihal in court. The lawyer of the Muslim intellectual group tried to convince the court that Dr. Ibtihal's speech was full of hate toward Islam and Muslim. His first argument was that Muslim today don't go for jihad or force anyone to accept their religion. This argument was refuted by the lawyer of Dr. Ibtihal on the ground that she did not mention anything like that in her speech. His second argument was that Muslims today live peaceful side by side with their Jewish and Christian neighbors. This argument likewise was refuted because it had nothing to do with the speech. The third argument of the lawyer was to try to prove that Dr. Ibtihal used unauthentic Islamic books. Her lawyer asked him to give his criterion of deciding which book was authentic and which one was unauthentic. The lawyer could not provide any criterion or tell who had the right to decide on the authenticity of those ancient religious books. The last allegation of the lawyer was to try to prove to the court that those quotations she mentioned in her speech were considered by Muslim scholars today to be added later on by some enemies of Islam, the Jews and Christians. The lawyer of Dr. Ibtihal asked him to provide his proofs that the enemies of Islam added those quotations. Moreover, the lawyer asked him if the Muslim scholars discovered that those quotations were added by the enemies of Islam, then why they did not erase them from those books. When the lawyer failed to prove any of the accusations, the court dropped the charge of hate speech from Dr. Ibtihal and dismissed the case. Shortly after the hate speeches trial was over, Dr. Ibtihal received an official invitation from the University of Athens to deliver a couple speeches to the professors and students on the teachings of Islam about women. The speeches would be delivered in 2 consecutive days. The letter of the university stated that she would not be bothered by any question. Anyone wishes to respond to her speeches, he could do so through writing or speaking. She would not be required to respond to those writings and speeches. The invitation stated further that she would be granted full protection. Dr. Ibtihal liked the invitation but worried about the consequences. Even though she could not resist the temptation of speaking in the prestigious the National and Kapodistrian University of Athens. She accepted the invitation and promised to speak on the issues of women in Islam in those 2 days. The university auditorium could house up to 5,000 guests. On the first day Dr. Ibtihal delivered her remarkable speech, many people were refused entering because all the seats were occupied. The security men refused to allow anyone to enter the auditorium and stand on his feet. This time Dr. Ibtihal began her speech by talking about her tragedy as a woman. She explained how the fear of dishonoring her father's name had haunted her for so long and altered the course of her life. How her father controlled her and forced her to marry her cousin because he wouldn't trust her to live alone in another city. How the Islamic religious court abused her for her love affair with a Christian man and finally condemned her to death for her conversion from Islam to Christianity. While she was narrating her abuses and tragedies in Sudan, Dr. Ibtihal could see tears falling on the cheeks of some guests who were sitting in the front rows. After she finished her brief narration about her past life, she began to speak about the teachings of Islam about women. I would like to divide my speech about women in Islam into 2 broad headings. I would speak today on the teachings of Islam about women, and then tomorrow I would speak about marriage in Islam. Although these 2 topics are interrelated and overlap, still it would be useful if they are separated. When I speak tomorrow about marriage in Islam, if the time will permit, I will touch on the marriage life of the Prophet Muhammad. I believe the lives of women in Islam are restricted and measured by the lives of the wives of the Prophet Muhammad. If I cannot able to cover all that in these 2 days, I would look for another opportunity to do so. After all, I am not an expert speaker. I don't know how to divide my time. I have never thought one day I would be standing in front of such a huge gathering of intellectual people and speak to them on something I am not specialized in. I am a medical doctor by profession. Somehow, the Sudanese students in Athens made out of me a speaker. The audience clapped their hands when Dr. Ibtihal made those last remarks. Speaking about women in Islam requires one to look at the teachings of the Quran as well as the teachings of the hadiths of the Prophet Muhammad. These 2 are inseparable and they determine the life of each and every Muslim woman in the world. Some Muslim feminists today are trying to separate the 2, but their efforts have not yet bear fruits. The main sources of Islamic laws regarding women are the Quran and the hadiths. By calling the latter misogynistic teachings will not solve the problems of Muslim women. No Muslim scholar would agree that some teachings of the Prophet are anti to the women. All Muslim scholars throughout the history of Islam held the Quran and the words of the Prophet Muhammad as equally sacred and revelation of God. In order to make this point more clear, I would like to quote the words of Hacht and Newton. The authentic hadith is believed to be nothing short of revelation, for the Quran says of Muhammad, he does not speak out of low desires. It is not but inspiration inspired. Quran Surat Al-Najm 53, verses 3-4. The only difference between the Quran and the Hadith is that whereas the former was revealed directly through the angel Gabriel with the very letters that are embodied by Allah, the latter was revealed without letters and words. Hacked and Newton 1996, page 1. The Quran strongly endorses the authenticity of the Hadith and leaves Muslim men and women with no preference between the two. Whenever Allah and the Apostle have decided a matter, it is not for a faithful man or woman to follow a course of their own choice. Quran, Surat Al-Ahzab 33, verse 36. The most destructive teaching of the Hadith about women can be found in one of the most authentic teachings of the Prophet Muhammad. The Hadith that I am about to quote defines the Muslim woman and put her under the control of man forever. Allah's Apostle once said to a group of women, "I have not seen anyone more deficient in intelligence and religion than you. A cautious, sensible man can be led astray by some of you." The women asked, "O Allah's Apostle, what is deficient in our intelligence and religion?" He said, "Is not the evidence of two women equal to the witness of one man?" They replied in the affirmative. He said, "This is the deficiency of your intelligence. Isn't it true that a woman can neither pray nor fast during her menses?" The women replied in the affirmative. He said, "This is the deficiency in your religion." Sahih Bukhari, Hadith number 301 and 856. The authenticity of the above hadith is beyond dispute. It is mentioned repeatedly in the most authentic two collections of Sahih Bukhari and Sahih Muslim. When Bukhari and Muslim both accept a hadith, it is called Mutafagun alayhi, which means agreed upon. Muslim scholars consider this as the highest degree of authenticity. Hacked and Newton 1996, page 3. The Arabic phrase al-Nisanagi Satan Aglayan and Deen, which means the women are deficient in intelligence and religion, is on the tip of every Muslim's tongue. This statement is used by scholars as well as lay people to define women. To turn to further examples, the Prophet Muhammad said, "The woman is like a rib, if you try to straighten her, she will break. So if you want to get benefit from her, do so while she still has some crookedness." Sahih Bukhari, Volume 7, Hadith number 113. Women are ungrateful to their husbands and are ungrateful for the favors and the good, charitable, deeds done to them. If you have always been good, benevolent, to one of them and then she sees something in you, not of her liking, she will say, "I have never received any good from you." Sahih al-Bukhari Volume 1 Hadith number 28. When a woman comes, she comes in the form of a devil. Sahih Muslim, Hadith number 3240. The Prophet said, "I have not left any calamity, or fitna, after me more detrimental to men than women." Al-Bukhari and Muslim agreed upon this hadith. Sahih al-Bukhari, Volume 7, Hadith number 33. O women! Give alms, as I have seen that the majority of the dwellers of hellfire were you, women. Sahih al-Bukhari Volume 1, Hadith number 301. Amongst the inmates of paradise the women would form the minority. Sahih Muslim, Hadith number 6600. Those who entrust their affairs to a woman will never know prosperity. Mernisi 1993, page 49. Based on this hadith, the Sharia law in Muslim countries doesn't allow a woman to be a president, judge, lawyer, and religious leader such as imam. The woman is not allowed to lead men in prayer at all events if they are underage. So, the Muslim woman is not allowed to be an imama or khalifa. When Dr. Ibtihal had said, "The Muslim woman is not allowed to be an imama or khalifa," the audience laughed, which led her to laugh too. While she was laughing, she said, "Yes, I know the words imama and khalifa don't exist in the vocabulary of the Sharia law." As a matter of fact, the sentence, "a Muslim woman an imama or a khalifa," is an oxymoron sentence for Muslims. Some Muslims have never heard those two terms, an imama or a khalifa. No Muslim woman has ever declared herself a khalifa or an imama except two cases. It happened only once, when an Egyptian royal woman, called Shajara al-Dur, after the death of her husband the Caliph of Egypt, declared herself the new Calipha. The Muslim imams and scholars condemned her caliphate, preached sermons against her, and stirred the entire nation against her. Muslim Egyptians strongly protested on the streets against her un-Islamic decision and for 2 months destroyed half of Cairo until they forced her to step down. Shajara al-Dur was stripped naked and beaten to death with clogs by the bondmaids of al-Mansur Ali, the new Caliph of Egypt. Her naked body was found lying outside the citadel. According to the historian Ibn Is, Shajara al-Dur was dragged from her feet and thrown from the top naked, with a cloth around her waist. She stayed in the moat for 3 days, not buried. Al-Makrizi, page 494, Volume 1 and Ibn Takri, pages 102 through 273, Volume 6. The second case is a modern one when an American woman appointed herself an imama and led some Muslims in prayer. It is strictly forbidden in Islam that in no uncertain terms men and women stand side by side or shoulder to shoulder and perform their prayer. They are not even permitted to perform their prayer together in the same room. Moreover, woman under no circumstances is allowed to lead men and women in prayer. It happened once and that woman was condemned as an infidel and apostate and her prayer was declared null by the Muslim scholars of the Al-Azhar Al-Sharif University and many more Muslim clerics all over the world. Her name is Dr. Amina Wajid. She was born to an African-American family as a Methodist Christian in Bethesda, Maryland, but when she was 20 years old she pronounced the Shahada and became a Muslim woman. Then, she changed her name from Mary Teasley to Amina Wajid. Before she retired in 2008, Dr. Wajid worked as an associate professor of religion and philosophy at the Virginia Commonwealth University. No mosque in the entire United States of America agreed to allow her to conduct her mixed prayer in its facilities until finally she did it in a Catholic church on Friday, March 18, 2005. Allow me now to quote further misogynistic hadiths of the Prophet Muhammad, which are reflecting and exhibiting hatred, dislike, mistrust, and mistreatment of women. The Moroccan scholar Fatima Mernisi notes that some hadiths, prophetic tradition, originated from the book of al-Bukhari, which are told by the teachers hurt me. They state that the Prophet said, dog, donkey, and woman would annul anyone's prayer whenever they pass ahead them, break off between the praying man and Qibla. I was shocked to hear that sort of hadith and never repeat it with the hope that silence would wipe away this hadith out of my mind. I asked, how come the Prophet said that sort of hadith which hurt me so much? How could the beloved Muhammad hurt a little girl who is in her growth, attempt to make him as pillars of her romantic dreams? Mernisi 1991, page 82. Now let me quote a few examples of the misogynistic teachings from the Quran. The Quran states, and call into witness 2 witnesses, men, or if the 2 be not men, then 1 man and 2 women, such witness as you approve of, that if one woman errs the other will remind her. Surah Al-Baqarah 2, verse 282. According to this verse, if a Muslim woman witnesses the murder of her own son, she can't testify in court because her testimony is half of a man's and as such not accepted by the Sharia law. O Prophet, tell your wives and your daughters and the women of the believers to draw their cloaks close round them, when they go abroad. That will be better, so that they may be recognized and not annoyed. Allah is ever forgiving, merciful. Quran, Surah 33, verse 59. This verse orders Muslim women to put on hijabs, niqabs, or burqas. The following hadith created a paradigm shift in the Arab woman's life. Before Islam, the pagan Arab women used to enjoy so much freedom. Unfortunately, Islam deprived them of such freedom. There is no definition so widely used and accepted among Muslims for defining the woman than woman is awara. The term awara is defined in Encyclopedia of Islam as the external genitals, especially of the female. Hacked and Newton 1996, page 5. The word is derived from the noun nakedness or nudity. So, to put it in a simple meaning, the woman is bare naked, even if she is fully dressed up. In another hadith, Al-Tirmizi reported that the woman herself is a wara. The Prophet said, the woman is a rat. When she goes outside the house, the devil takes charge of her. Tirmizi Vol 2, hadith number 65. This hadith says that whenever the woman goes out of her house she is possessed by demons. So she is dangerous to the society and hence she supposed to be confined inside her house. In Kitab Adab al-Nikah, the Prophet said, 3 persons, if you esteem them they will dishonor you, and if you dishonor them they will esteem you, the woman, the servant, and the Nabatia. Tirmizi, page 51. There are 3 persons whose prayer will not be accepted, nor their virtues be taken above: the runaway slave until he returns back to his master, the woman with whom her husband is dissatisfied, and the drunk until he becomes sober. Mishkat al-Masabi, English translation, Book 1, Hadith number 74. The Prophet of Allah said, when a man calls his wife to satisfy his desire, let her come to him though she is occupied at the oven. Mishkat al-Masabi, English translation, Book 1, Hadith number 61. Based on this hadith and other verses of the Quran, a Muslim man is permitted to rape his wife if she refuses to sleep with him. The Messenger of Allah said, whenever a man calls his wife to his bed and she refuses, and then he passes the night in an angry mood, the angels curse her till she gets up at dawn. Sahih al-Bukhari, Volume 7, Hadith number 121. The Prophet said, had I ordered anybody to prostrate before anyone, I would have ordered women to prostrate before their husbands on account of men's rights over the women ordained by Allah. Mishkat al-Masabi, English translation, Hadith number 70. Reported by Abu Dawud, Ahmed, Tirmizi, Ibn Majah, and Ibn Hibban. Wife's beating. The Quran states, righteous women are therefore obedient. And those you fear may be rebellious, nushas, admonish them, banish them to their couches, and beat them. Quran, Surah 4, verse 34. This verse of the Quran gives the husband the right to beat his wife if she disobeys him. Although the verse doesn't give the reason for beating except disobedience, the Sharia law singles out 5 reasons. Beating of the wife is allowed by the Sharia in 5 cases. 1. When she does not wear fineries though wanted by the husband. 2. When she is called for sexual intercourse and she refuses without any lawful excuse. 3. When she is ordered to take a bath to clean herself from impurities for prayer and she refuses. 4. When she goes out of her house without permission of her husband. And 5. When she allows a man inside her house in the absence of her husband. Aisha, the beloved wife of the Prophet Muhammad, admitted that one day the Prophet got angry with her and struck her on her chest until it caused pain. He struck me on the chest which caused me pain, and then said, did you think that Allah and His Apostle would deal unjustly? Sahih Muslim, Book 4, Hadith number 2127. Before I end my speech, I would like to mention yet one more evil practice prescribed against women by the Prophet of Islam. I am aware that many Muslims today try to deny female genital mutilation. However, there are 3 authentic hadiths of the Prophet Muhammad commanding female genital mutilation. 1. Umayyah al-Ansarite narrated that a woman used to circumcise in Medina, and the Prophet said to her, do not overdo it, because this makes woman more favorable and it is more agreeable. Sahih al-Bukhari. 2. Aisha narrated that the Prophet Muhammad said, when a man sits between her 4 parts, legs and arms of his wife, and the 2 circumcised parts meet, the husband's penis and the wife's vagina, then ghusl becomes obligatory. Sahih Muslim. In other words, Muhammad said in this authentic hadith, when the circumcised husband and his genitally mutilated wife have sexual intercourse, then they both must do religious cleansing. 3. The Prophet Muhammad said, circumcision is a sunnah for men and a preservation of honor for women. Abu Malik and Abu Dawud. Following the commandment of their Prophet Muhammad, Muslims circumcise their girls to preserve the honor of their families. Every Muslim girl should be circumcised at the age of 4 or 5. Female genital mutilation or cutting involves the removal or the sealing of the labia majora and the labia minora together after the entire clitoris has been removed. Lois 1985, page 115. When the Muslim girl undergoes the female genital mutilation, she becomes abnormal. Her vagina is so narrowed or sealed that it is reduced to a small hole which allows the girl to urinate. Usually, the woman performing the circumcision will use a small thin reed to measure the hole that is supposed to be left open after the procedure is done. The small hole will not allow a finger to penetrate the vagina. Therefore, when the girl reaches adolescence, she is bound to have serious problems with the menstrual blood. Due to the small opening, some of the blood remains, causing infection. Many young Sudanese girls suffer from a genital disease called in Arabic hibban. This disease is caused by the blood that remains inside the vagina, and unless the girl goes for surgery, the infected private parts may cause death. However, due to the fear of losing the girl's virginity through the medical surgery or the prospect of widening her vagina, some families will not allow their daughters to go to the hospital to see a doctor. The reason behind this evil practice, as stated by the Prophet Muhammad, is preservation of honor for women, or to prevent the girl from engaging in premarital sex. In other words, the female circumcision will not allow the circumcised girl to practice sex before marriage even if she wants to do so. As a matter of fact, the circumcised girl will experience unbearable pain during sexual intercourse, and that makes her feel as if she is being raped. That is what the Prophet Muhammad meant by preservation of honor. He believes, the circumcision will prevent her from having sex before marriage. She will not be able even to indulge in masturbation. Female circumcision is meant to control the sexuality of the girl and destroy her desire for the opposite sex. It is barbaric, painful, and harms the girl. Through that primitive and barbaric procedure, the circumcised Muslim girl's vagina will be so sealed and narrowed until it will be reduced to a small hole, allows the girl only to urinate. The hole will be a little bigger than an eye of a needle. Intercourse will simply be impossible. It is just like locking up the girl's vagina or putting a secure lock on her private parts. The pre-Islamic Arabs used to fashion underwear made out of iron and place them around the private parts of their women. The iron underwear was called hizam al-ifa, or the belt of honor. If and when their women were taken captives, the captors might not be able to rape them. The same primitive idea passed on to Muslims and practiced today in more evil way through the female genital mutilation. Instead of putting those iron underwears and locking them up, in Islam locks are placed on the girls' vaginas. Moreover, in Islam, by removing the girl's clitoris, labia majora, and labia minora, her sexual organ will be destroyed and mutilated to the point that she loses all desire for sex. She doesn't experience clitoral orgasm or any other kind of orgasm because her sexual parts had already been removed and the remaining parts are mutilated and numbed. For that reason, sex for the Muslim girl is a painful experience because she can't enjoy sex. Some experts in this field believe that female genital mutilation is just like passing the death sentence on the vagina of the circumcised girl. Some Muslims argue that those private parts, which the midwife excises during the circumcision, will grow again. This is not true. The clitoris and 2 labias will never grow again. Once they are removed, they are gone forever. On her first wedding night, the Muslim bride will experience terrible pain and feels as if she is raped by her bridegroom. In many cases, bridegrooms could not able to penetrate until their brides are taken to the hospital. In actual fact, the small hole that is left open will not allow the bridegroom even to insert his finger. An erected man's phallus will be too big to go through such small opening. Those brides will undergo surgeries to widen their vaginas so that their bridegrooms could have normal sex with them. This custom of sending brides to the hospital prior to their wedding nights is common in Somalia. Sometimes, the fear of being labeled impotent or gay drives the groom to attempt everything to effect penetration. There are cases when the bridegrooms used knives to widen their brides' vaginas. I would like to end my first speech about the teachings of Islam about women here. As I promised, tomorrow I will speak about the teachings of the Quran and the Hadith about marriage. I will make polygamy my main focus. Once again, I would like to thank the Department of Religious Studies in this prestigious university for giving me the honor of speaking to the professors and students of this university.